Welcome to the Yahowah blog. I am your host, Greg Wynn. Today's program is going to be focused on taking a fresh look at In the Beginning. We're going to tour Yahweh's first and opening message to humankind as he described his creation of the universe, then of the earth, and finally of humankind. And as we do so, we're going to focus on some things I don't think anyone has ever considered before, and how, in particular, as we arrive upon the fourth day of creation, we're going to see God's testimony about the greater and lesser luminaries as never before revealed until this very moment. So what I'm sharing with you today is in an unpublished book. It's a project that I'm doing in my spare time as I try to advance the message of the Yahowah branded books through social media. And it is the fourth volume of Coming Home. It is about the herald, which is the role that I'm playing in reintroducing both Yahweh's name and his son, our Messiah and King, the very Son of God, Dode, to his people. Well, as the story begins, we commence our consideration of the most relevant revelations in this word's eye view of Yahweh's story. We find that the beginning, well, of course, is a very good place to start. God speaks to us about creation, about something he alone knows how it occurred. And while he provides an accurate accounting of when, how, and why he spoke the universe into existence, his testimony is replete with some insights that are very seldom considered. In fact, I think this will be the first time God's insights with regard to what he was also conveying spiritually through the creation account have ever been considered. So we're going to go back 14 billion years in time to the moment that God revealed in the beginning, the Almighty, in proximity to and while closely associated with the spiritual world and the material world, created them. Now, some interesting just insights along the way here is that in the beginning is Barythshyt, which is the actual name of the book. There is this misconception that the first book of God's testimony, which is misconstrued as a Bible, that means with Baal, the Lord, it's actually the Torah, and the first book of the Torah is Barythshyt, not Genesis. And Barythshyt means in the beginning. Genesis is a transliteration of a Greek word, and he didn't convey any of this in Greek. He conveyed it in Hebrew. And therefore, the title of the book needs to be in Hebrew. So in Barythshyt 1:1, God said, in the beginning, Barythshyt, the Almighty, Elohim, God, in proximity to and closely associated with. This is eth. This is actually an important part of the story because God is saying that I'm telling you this story from creation. And the reason that's important is that time flows much differently in presence of great velocity or great mass, great energy. And so time flowed at a rate, we actually know this now, and we'll get into this more later, at 10 to the 12th slower than it does here on Earth, which of course at this point didn't even exist. The term for created is bara, it means conceived and caused a new existence, choosing perfect transformation and birth, planning, preparing, shaping, producing, and fashioning something out of the elements and making it happen. And the two things that he said that he created were the spiritual world, Shamayim, which is the abode of God, and the material realm. In this case, the material realm would be the universe itself, Barythshyt, Genesis 1:1. And the material realm, according to God, existed formless, without shape, tohu, lacking organization in a state of lifeless confusion, as something which would dissipate into nothingness had additional energy not been added. An orderless, chaotic, and empty space. Bohu, randomized, void, a deserted and unoccupied place, desolate of life. Dark, hidden, obscure, and unknowable. Wa Chosek, a existence comprised of matter, incomprehensible and indecipherable, appearing confusing and black, incapable of being perceived or even seen, in proximity to the presence, Penah, of the vast and exhaustible power and inaccessible, mysterious energy of the Big Bang, Dahum, of the great commotion, from the agitated and loud, enormous and yet controlled explosion, with a wave following wave without intermission. Then the Ruach, the Spirit. The Spirit is the maternal manifestation of Yahweh's power, courage, attitude, and acceptance, the very heart and mind, the presence of God, of the Almighty, hovered over and quickly administered to. She moved back and forth, supervising everything, brooding over her infant creation as a loving mother, instigating an exceedingly fast and quivering motion, flying rapidly over the suspended universe above, all of it to increase the pace of the accomplishments, of the appearance of a fluid state. This is Barythshyt 1:2. Again, wonderful insights here. For example, we are told that after this God talking the universe into existence, that the material realm was formless, without shape. Most people don't know, but initially all there was energy. As a matter of fact, time didn't even exist at this point, because time doesn't exist until there is the presence of matter. And at this point, quarks had not confined. It was just a very hot plasmic state of existence, and it was therefore without shape. Now, that's another interesting insight that is conveyed through these ideas, which is that matter really is nothing more than organized energy. Energy and matter are the same things. They're just different arrangements of those things and different amounts of them. So without matter, the energy was not yet with shape, not yet organized, which is what he conveyed through Tohu. It was an orderless, chaotic, and empty space. Enormous amounts of emptiness to be filled, and it was chaotic. Now, Yahweh put exactly the amount of energy at the exact right place and moment, and with the proper organization for it to turn out the way that it did. And it was an enormous calculation for him to have done so. But it is chaotic in the sense of, if God planned everything out such that it all just turned out the way that he had designed it, then there would be no purpose for us, be no purpose for free will, be no purpose for our lives. And so randomness, they call it the chaos theory, is necessary for there to be an interesting progression of events throughout time. And he reemphasizes that he was in proximity to this vast inexhaustible power and inaccessible, mysterious energy of the Big Bang, while also saying that the space was dark, hidden, obscure, and unknowable. These are really interesting statements again, because now we, in just the last 20 years, have come to realize that the overwhelming preponderance of our universe is created of things and exists of things that aren't just unknowable to humanity in their present state, but will never be knowable to us. They exceed our comprehension. I'm speaking of what we call dark energy and dark matter, which we can calculate its existence and know that it represents 94% of the universe, and that one has an attractive nature, the other one has a repellent nature. We call the one that's repellent energy and the one that's attractive matter. But other than knowing that they exist and that one is pushing things apart and one is trying to pull things together, we don't know what they are. Now, I have surmised that they are actually dimensions beyond time, and that time is the fourth dimension, and that what we call dark energy and dark matter are the fifth and sixth dimensions of the universe. But God made it quite clear that these things would remain unknowable to us, and they, in fact, have been just that way. And one speaks of matter, the other one speaks of energy. What is also, I think, God's way of poking fun at us, I'm just being humorous, if you will, Tehom speaks of a Big Bang. So when science thought that they were so smart and said, we've now proved that there's no need for God because we have shown that there was a Big Bang that created the universe. Well, 3,500 years before they came to that conclusion, Yahweh had already authored it. And the other thing that, of course, is interesting is that since Yahweh has to be a dimension beyond the universe that he created, if it's six dimensions and he is seven, rather than himself interacting with the energy that he put into the system, he had his set apart spirit, the Ruach Kodesh, interact. And she is still the one who interacts in our lives, helping us to understand God's plan, his testimony, what he is offering and what he expects in return, and emboldening those who choose to work for him. And she hovered over and quickly administered to what God had set into motion, as everything was in a fluid state. Barythshyt 1:2. Then God said, and this is also important because what he is conveying here is that he talked the universe into existence. Words are the most powerful things in the universe. They are the conveyors of relationship. They're the conveyors of knowledge. They are the source of causality. So God said, let there continuously be light. And there was light as it came into existence. Again, obviously, he's correct. The universe began with light. It was all energy initially, and it would take a considerable time before that energy would cool sufficiently for quarks to coalesce. And once they are able to coalesce, then matter is able to be formed and time begins to flow. But the first thing that exists is light. The first thing that Yahweh spoke about is light, because light is the thing that is most similar to Yahweh. On a photon of light, all time exists simultaneously. Light is the source of enlightenment. It is the source of life. Without light, there is no life. Without light, there is no knowledge. Light is essential to our very existence, and in it is eternal. It is also the universal constant. And so Yahweh saw that the association with the light was truly good. Well, he's telling us that if you want to be in a very good place, associate with his light, with his enlightenment, with his words, and stay away from the darkness of politics and religion. as they lead to exactly the opposite place. Later, Yahweh is going to talk about a tree of the knowledge of good and bad. And yet, he's already defined what's good. Light is the closest thing to his nature. He's saying, if you associate with me, that will work out very well for you. God then caused the ongoing separation between the light and concerned about the understanding made it possible through this connection with the darkness. This is Barythshyt in the beginning, Genesis 1:4. There are very few things that are as essential to know as it pertains to Yahweh as the concept of separation. If you are part of a large group, particularly a religious group, if you're a Jew, the most popular religion, most popular group is Judaism. If you're a Gentile, the most popular group association would be Christianity. The second most popular in terms of numbers would be Islam. The third most popular would be this new religion that has emerged recently as a religion of man called progressive politics. And so God is saying that separation from the norm is really essential to a relationship with him. It is the first condition of the covenant, to walk away from country and from culture and from this integration of religion and politics in human history. So separation between things, and in particular between the light and the darkness. And God said, if you understand the concept of separation, being separated from the world of man, which is devolving very quickly, look at the images coming out from the world as progressives and Muslims have leagued together to terrorize people into submission and capitulation so that they have ultimate control. If you look at these things, this is a very good time to be separated from them and unto God. And all things important to God are set apart and separated. And in this case, the light has nothing to do with the darkness. And he uses a term, probably my favorite Hebrew term, bayan, to make this connection. What he is saying is that if you can understand how things relate, how separation, light and darkness, how they relate to one another, then you're in a position to transition from simply knowing about these things to understanding them, understanding the big picture as to what is light, what is darkness, what it means to be set apart and separated from one unto the other. And that is what God is conveying in Barythshyt 1:4. Now, this marvelous introduction to creation, which was provided by our Creator, conveys, I think, many things which are relevant to our existence and to the verification of God's inspiration of this particular witness at the beginning of the Torah. To begin, Yahweh's depiction of these events was valid. And it was valid 3 millennia before humans finally stumbled upon proof that he had been correct all along. As a result of observing the elongation of the visible spectrum known as the redshift in galaxies moving away from the Earth in all directions, we obtained irrefutable evidence to demonstrate that the universe had a beginning, which means that it was created. This is something science refuted until the phenomenon demonstrating the expansion of the universe was presented by Edwin Hubble in the 1920s. Further a galaxy is away from the Earth, the faster it is receding. As a matter of fact, we find that much of the universe is moving away from us faster than the speed of light, even though nothing can move faster than the speed of light. And it's because the universe itself is still expanding. Now, perhaps more amazing, and I think equally relevant, 15 years earlier in June, and then again in September of 1905. So 15 years before Edwin Hubble announced his discovery. A really bright fellow, a Jewish lad named Albert Einstein, you may have heard of him, theorized and published two of the most famous aspects of his special theory of relativity, both of which are essential to understanding God's testimony. First, he explained that time was relative and that it flowed at different rates, moving more slowly as velocity increases and in the presence of great energy or matter, recognizing that the ultimate extreme of these conditions existed during the Big Bang. Second, Einstein theorized that matter was simply a diminished and organized form of energy. According to his formula, E equals mc squared, they are different amounts and states of the same thing. This is why creation began chaotically as light energy and then was organized into the material realm. Therefore, the cornerstones of modern cosmology, the realization that the universe was created in a Big Bang and that it began in one place in time and that light came before matter with chaos preceding order and that it is expanding beginning 6 days ago from the perspective of a witness to its conception, were all conveyed in this 3,480-year-old text with copious proofs of its antiquity found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, I'd call that a good Barythshyt beginning. Prior to the 1920s, Yahowah alone had proof that the cosmos was conceived in a Big Bang, and he told us so. He knew that it began as light, which produced matter over time, and he said as much. God revealed that his creation was still expanding, something else which proved to be accurate. And as for how long it took him to do these things, when we measure the passage of time at creation, using the microwave background radiation still evident from it, and picked up and reported back to us by the Wilkinson probe, we know that time was stretched 10 to the 12th power relative to a clock here on Earth. And when we divide 14 billion years by 10 to the 12th power, the result is 6 24-hour days. These insights alone, I think, are sufficient to demonstrate divine inspiration for the Torah, and this is just the beginning. In his words, God revealed something that we have just recently surmised. 94% of the universe is comprised of repellent energy and attractive matter that we cannot explain. We can't identify it. We don't understand it. We don't even have the tools to be able to explain, identify, or understand it. All we can do is quantify it. The cosmos seems to have an inexhaustible source of mysterious energy. Now, since Yahowah would have to exist in a dimension beyond the construct he created, he would not be able to enter it without representations of his nature, implements like messengers, envoys, or words. And so here, God dispatched his Ruach spirit to care for and administer to the dynamic and fluid state of his creation. She still serves in this way. Now, it bears repeating, since Yahowah made this point, God makes things happen, and he engages with us through words. In this case, the most important word is or, light. It is the most important thing, and I think, in our known universe to reveal the nature of God. In this capacity, energy is also the universal constant and standard, which is relevant because God does not change. On a photon of light, all time exists. which is germane to our understanding because it explains how Yahweh was able to witness and report our future and our past, creating prophecy as future history. And in keeping with his words, like light, Hebrew verbs are also liberated in time. There is this mythos in religious circles, particularly in Islam and Christianity, that the New Testament is a divinely inspired text. But Yahweh is quite clear. What he says, if you want to know if I inspired something and if the people writing it and conveying it can be trusted, the thing you must look for is prophecy. And it must be true of things said in the distant past, like this creation account, and in the distant future, that were memorialized and proved to be true 100% of the time. There isn't a single valid prophecy in the entirety of the Christian New Testament. Even as you turn to the book of Revelations and it speaks of an upcoming period, all of it was plagiarized and paraphrased from the actual prophets of Yahweh, and then blended together. And unfortunately for the author of Revelation, many of the things that were written came from Ezekiel, who was demonstrably a false prophet. Now, as it turns to Islam, Muslims want to say the prophet Muhammad, and yet Muhammad never issued a single prophecy that has any chance of ever coming true or that has come true. I mean, he didn't even know his own history. He couldn't keep his own story straight one day to the next. Everything he said about history, he made up and has proved to be completely invalid. Everything he said about science is laughable. And the few things that he had to say about the future are all ludicrous. He was not a prophet. He got nothing right. To associate Muhammad with the prophets who spoke for Yahweh, or to infer that the Quran was an inspired book, is pure lunacy. We'll get to the moon here in a moment too, which is perhaps why Islam chose the moon as its symbol. Also, in our journey from the limitations of the physical world to the infinite possibilities we're going to enjoy in the spiritual realm, light is greater than matter by a multiple of the square of the speed of light. Therefore, Yahweh knew what he was talking about when he said that light is truly good, because it is being transformed from physical beings to energy-based beings that Yahweh is going to empower and enrich the children of the covenant. Again, this is the antithesis of Christianity and Islam, where there is a bodily resurrection. In Islam, there's a bodily resurrection so that souls are either treated with decadence and endless virgins and Allah's rendition of paradise, or more importantly for most people, so that Allah can inflict tortures on physical bodies in hell. And in Christianity, the whole religion is based on the myth of bodily resurrection, which would be incredibly counterproductive. To be resurrected bodily takes us from making that transition into being a spiritual being and back to all the limitations of physiology. It's the very basis of Christianity is laughable in that regard. So God is saying that we are going to be transformed as to light, and that is truly good. Separation is also important because without separating ourselves from the religious and political constraints of man, we cannot be close to God. Yahweh is set apart, as is everyone and everything valued by him. Even to reason and to be rational requires separation. It is how we distinguish and discriminate between right and wrong. One of my great pet peeves today is that progressives are trying to constrain free speech. They don't want people to be able to say things that are contrary to their belief system. But if you don't have access to information, then there is no means to be able to differentiate right and wrong. My view is everybody should be able to say whatever they want. Now, saying something that is pro-Islam, for example, and siding with the rapists and slave traders and mass murderers of history is stupid. But they ought to be able to say it, and that we ought to be able, as people, we should be taught how to use our conscience so that we can discern between right and wrong, distinguish what things are true and what things are not. Unfortunately, in the indoctrinated realm of progressive academics, logic is no longer taught. They want you to be indoctrinated. They do not want you to be discriminating. They do not want you to be able to execute good judgment. And good judgment is all about determining right from wrong, good from bad, truth from deceit. Lastly, the most insightful word in the Hebrew lexicon is bien. We shared that momentarily, or just moments ago. Here it was translated in conjunction with the light as concerned about the understanding that is made possible through this connection with the darkness. By being observant, we come to yada, to know, but it is only the first step. With bien, something far more powerful takes shape as we make the connections needed to understand. And comprehension then becomes the most powerful concept in the universe. Words are the most powerful implements, but the most powerful thing of all is when we make the connections between words to the point we understand. This is a summary view of the first day of creation, of the time literally before time. And I say this because, as I've shared, time does not flow apart from the existence of matter. And for this to occur, quarks must be combined as light energy is cooled sufficiently for matter to coalesce. Now, so that we have a better understanding of this and of the power of words and the nature of light, I want to skip to the fourth day, because there are lessons there that will rock your world. Yahweh's most endearing creation isn't galaxies. It isn't even this planet. It most certainly isn't just life like animal life. His most enduring creation, the one thing that he loves the most, that he calls his beloved, his chosen, is Dod, his son. And this fourth day is largely about him. In his presentation of the fourth day, God is a father, enjoying his relationship with his firstborn, and their greatest achievement together would transpire at the dawn of the fourth millennia of human development. This revelation is addressing what occurred in, well, the revelation occurred anyway, 1,750 or millions of years ago, which would be 1.7 billion years ago cosmologically. Well, predictive of what would occur in year 4,000 Yah. Year 4,000 Yah is 33 CE. And then again, it's predictive of what's going to occur in year 6,000 Yah, which is 2033 on our horizon. It is describing events which would unfold during man's fourth millennia outside of the garden, and then sixth, as we are on the cusp of returning. According to God, there would be two luminaries who would become especially visible, with one reflecting the greater one's light, particularly in association with God's timeline, and the Moedim, which are the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. This is the initial introduction of the most brilliant among us, and to the one who would serve as witness to him, reflecting his enlightenment. And in this regard, while Dod is the sun, as the 89th Mizmor said, he will return as brilliant as the sun in God's presence. And that same Mizmor had identified the role I'm playing as the moon. And therefore, I am the moon, metaphorically. It is the role that God established, literally, as he was creating the universe long ago. God said, "Let there be two lights." In fact, the verb haya would probably more accurately be translated, "there shall be." There will exist. It was written in the call imperfect jussive. What that means is that since God is speaking to us in third person, jussive is a reflection of third person volition. So this is God saying, I want there to be. And imperfect means this has an ongoing existence. So this, what he's talking about, is going to have unfolding consequences throughout time and is not going to be limited or constrained in time. The call simply means that what I'm telling you now should be accepted literally. And it's establishing a genuine relationship between God and these luminaries. So God said, Amar, he declared, expressing in words, I want there to be. God wants there to be lights as luminaries, ma'or, as sources of illumination. Ma'or is a compound of ma, which means to ponder the implications of something, and or, light. In the expanse, within the spreading out of the matter and space of the heavens, beyond the sky and atmosphere, to understand the separation between the daylight as it is distinct from the darkness of the night. We'll go on to the next statement in a moment, but let's pause here a bit more. I've shared already that God said this, which means he's expressing himself using words, and that by using the jussive in third person, he is expressing what he wants. It is the will of God for there to be, on an ongoing basis, a relationship between himself and these lights as luminaries, these sources of illumination that we should ponder to appreciate their implications. In the expanse of the heavens, beyond the sky and the atmosphere, all for the same purpose that we spoke of moments ago, to Baal Bien, to understand the separation, the distinction between the source of light and darkness, what it's like to have this opportunity to live in the light versus being cast into the eternal darkness of Sheol. This is the distinction that God is encouraging us to make through the enlightenment of these two luminaries. They will exist, he says, as symbols, as signs, la'oth, for the purpose of signals concerning distinguishing words to be recognized, to be remembered. They're nonverbal representations which have meaning, providing illustrations, examples, and proofs. They're metaphors, clearly known when evaluating recompense and reward from uth, a means to be seen, agreeing, and providing your consent. And for the restoring witness to the appointed meeting times, wah la moed, as well as for days and for years. Barythshyt, Genesis 1:14. What a statement. So God is saying that he wants these luminaries to continue to exist in the expanse and the expansive realm of the heavens, for us to understand the importance of being set apart, and the separation, the distinction between light and darkness. And for a time, then, he says, they will actually exist as symbols and signs. Their purpose is to provide information, to signal you so that you can recognize and remember what is being conveyed. And in particular, these two luminaries are for the restoring witness to the appointed meeting times, Moed. Yahweh has two titles that he applies to his 7 annual meetings. One is Mikre. Mikre means invitations to be called out and meet. Moed is the other. A Moed is a restoring witness to the eternal testimony specified through the appointed meeting times. So Yahweh now is saying that these two luminaries are symbols and signs. They exist to help you appreciate the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. They help you understand what Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, Shabuah and Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah represent. Would you ever have known that if we weren't sharing it with you right now? And how profound is that? That God said there would be two luminaries who would help you understand the Moed. These 7 annual meetings where we have been invited into Yahweh's company for him to make us immortal, for him to perfect us and adopt us into his family, to enrich and empower us, to bring us to his home, and to prepare us for his return with his beloved Dode on reconciliation, so we can all camp out together as we once did in Eden. That is what the Almighty is communicating to you. He also said that these luminaries would help you understand, 2 of them, luminaries, would help you understand time for days and for years. And it would prove true. Not only would Dode live 3 lives in the heart of God's plan, 3,000 years ago as the Messiah and the King of Israel, 2,000 years ago he returned as the Passover lamb, fulfilling Passover, unyeasted bread, and Bakurim. And he will return 2,000 years after that date, now just 8 to 9 years from this program, on Yom Kippurim in year 2033, or 6,000 Yah. I am the first to correctly establish these dates so that you would know the years, and the first to correctly translate and explain Dode's revelation to Daniel, where he tells us exactly when he is going to arrive in Jerusalem to resolve our guilt and to make us perfect with God. So this statement, through the Jusiv mood, conveys Yahweh's will. He is sharing what he wants to happen. And, God's fairly influential. What he wants to happen, he's capable of arranging, and he chose 2 luminaries through whom he would transform his creation. Meor encourages us to ponder the implications of these sources of enlightenment, differentiating between them and the darkness surrounding them. And just as the sun and moon pierce through the gloom and impediments to help us see things more clearly, these 2 individuals would convey Yahweh's light. Without light, there is no life. Without darkness, there is no way to hide from God. This makes it essential for us to begin to understand the differences that exist between them. And when words like oath and moed are inadequately translated as simply signs and seasons, respectively, in most English Bibles, the profoundly important message contained in this statement is squandered. Accurately communicated, these two sentences convey that the moed mikre, the restoring witnesses to the invitations to be called out and meet at the designated occasions, can be known, they can be timed, they can be better understood through the distinction that is being made here on the fourth day between daylight and darkness, especially when considering the will of God relative to these particular luminaries. It is through the moed, the enduring testimony of the restoring witness to the appointed meeting times, that we learn how to approach Yahweh and to become part of his family. These wondrous signs convey an important message from our Creator. Understand the moed mikre, and you will comprehend the means that Yahweh endowed enabled during Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim to restore our relationship. And in this regard, even Yada plays his part, because he will offer his life to prepare the mortal remnant of Yisrael for their return and for the ultimate homecoming, doing so on Towrah. These luminaries and appointments not only demonstrate Yahweh's commitment to his plan, which is to reconcile our relationship, but they also reveal the very framework of time itself from beginning to end. Now, this is why the fourth day commences with Dod, David, representing the cornerstone of the covenant home, being portrayed in the 89th Mizmor, revealed on the occasion as brilliant as the sun in God's presence. Then this formative era concludes with Dod fulfilling the first three Moedim in year 4000 Yah. The Mashiach, Messiah, wrote the words at the dawn of this era that he fulfilled during its conclusion. And even as the sun would rise from Sheol to Shabaim during firstborn children, at the same time the sun would set in Jerusalem, the source of guidance regarding reconciliation, and it would not rise again until after the moon came to reflect his brilliance. Failing to appreciate the merit of the 7 annual Moed Mikre, clerics and laity alike have been deceived into believing that salvation, which isn't actually required under God's plan to perfect us on Matzah, is either a product of religious faith or laborious works. Blinded by their beliefs and rules, the religious are as manipulative of Yahweh's calendar as they are prone to misappropriate his purpose. They remain unaware of the means that God has provided to reconcile our relationship with him. They don't understand why he did so, when this occurred, or with whom. And they do not know that it is possible to date every significant event from the garden and back to Eden, past, present, and future. The fulfillments of the Moed Mikre are the hallmarks of time. And to make this known, there would be 2 luminaries, and they would write the signs which, when read, bring us home. When people lose track of the significance and the symbolism of Yahweh's Moed Mikre, particularly of Pesach, Passover, Matzah, unyeasted bread, Bikurim, firstborn children, and then the 2 harvests, Shabuah, the promise of 7, and Towrah, trumpets, leading to Kippurim, reconciliations, and ultimately to coming back to the garden on Sukkah shelters. They're lost. They're blind. They stumble around in the dark without a map. When the religious replace Yahweh's Moedim with the likes of Purim, Rosh Hashanah, and Hanukkah, New Year's or St. Valentine's Day, Lent, Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Halloween, or Christmas, they squander the opportunity to live with the light and his luminaries. The Moed Mikre embody Yahweh's 7-step plan of redemption and reconciliation, while also providing the covenant's 5 benefits. They establish the days and years upon which our calendar transpires and which our relationship with God and prophecy unfold. There are very few things as important as reading them, because Haya'oth, they exist as symbols, signs, and signals, distinguished by words written about them to help us remember the Moed, the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony and these appointed meeting times. Between the moon and the sun, we can ascertain the days of the year for us to meet with our Maker and to determine the years when these seminal events in our salvation history were and will be fulfilled. There is a direct and a profound correlation between the description of the 4th creative day and the fulfillment of the Moed Mikre, particularly of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, in year 4000 Yah. Dod, as the Passover lamb, opened the doorway to life at this time in 33 CE. His nephesh soul then fulfilled unyeasted bread the following day, unleavening our souls of the fungus of religion and politics. He carried our guilt with him into hell. Released from Sheol, the firstborn was escorted by the set-apart spirit on firstborn children back to his father. Collectively, they facilitated the adoption of the covenant family, making us immortal and perfect on Pesach and Matzah. Then, as a result of Bikurim, God's children are enriched, they're empowered, we're enlightened, delivering all 5 benefits promised by the B'ath covenant. Also noteworthy, the 4th Mikre, that of Shabuah, the promise of 7, is also on full display on this, the 4th day. While the first 3 called out assembly meetings depict the means to our adoption to the covenant family, the 4th appointment brings us home. During this open invitation to witness the benefits of having chosen to rely on the solution that Father and Son, Yahweh and Dod, provided through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, the children of the covenant are brought home in the most complete of the Katsir harvests. On Shabuah, the covenant's children are not only immersed in Yahweh's light and separated from the world, further enriched and enlightened, empowered and enabled, we are emancipated from the physical restraints of the earth during this ingathering, so that we come out of the darkness into the light. Showing the way is the restoring witness, the herald, conveying Dod's illustrative example. While the Son loved the light and wrote the lyrics which lead us all to this place, and then returned to make it all possible, not a single person on the planet was aware of it. Not one. Not for the 2,000 years that have transpired. Someone had to reintroduce Yahweh and Dod to the people who had abandoned and forgotten both. And so before it was too late. Therein is the reason for the lesser luminary. This opportunity to become part of Yahweh's family and this distinction and determination are all highlighted by badal bien, to distinguish and discern what it means to be set apart, to ascertain the means to be included or expelled from the Bereth covenant. God wants us to badal bien, to comprehend the divide by separating light from darkness. Essential to this understanding is the fact that the Maor, sources of light, which readers are encouraged to contemplate and evaluate, Yada Yahowah, will exist as luminaries for a period of time, communicating as La'oth, enlightening representations, conveying meaning, providing indications, illustrations, and insights, even proof regarding how to approach, serving as metaphors which make us all more aware, make this all more clearly known, especially when evaluating our recompense or reward. Now, in this light, the root of oath is uth, which means to be seen as agreeing, providing our consent regarding Yahweh's provisions during the Moed. Now, just briefly returning to the scientific aspects of his witness, we discover that calibrated to the Creator's clock, the fourth day dawned 1.75 billion years ago and closed just 875 million years in our past. During this period, Yahweh said that the greater and lesser luminaries represented by the sun and the moon became signs, which is to say that they became visible. He did not say that he created the sun or the moon on the fourth day, because that had already occurred on the second. Disingenuous atheists have lamely attacked the Torah's creation account based upon this false premise, creating a straw man whereby the emergence of plant life preceded the sun, but that's a religious and logical fallacy. Scientists have recently discovered that during the epoch referenced by the fourth day of creation, the Earth's atmosphere, formerly choked with carbon and debris, transitioned from barely translucent to transparent. Photosynthesis occurring within the vegetation, which was conceived and disseminated on the third day, consumed much of the carbon dioxide in the air and produced an oxygen-rich atmosphere, setting the stage for the emergence of higher functioning, oxygen-dependent animals. But it took a very long time, 3 billion years to be precise, all of the second and third days, cosmologically, for plants to produce sufficient oxygen to fuel more complex animal forms. That is why there is no mention of them living at this time or of any fossil evidence of animal life. It would explode on the scene in the fifth day, cosmologically speaking, exactly as Yahweh explained. Now, in recognition that Yahweh's presentation of his intent in the fourth day draws its sense of purpose from the ongoing statement and from the opening statements, let's consider what follows. And I'm going to share it with you, and then we're going to take a break so that these programs don't become too long, and we'll do part 2 of In the Beginning. Therefore, let them exist for a time as sources of illumination and as luminaries in the expanse of space and time of the heavens, to provide light and illumination upon the earth, and especially the land. And therefore it would exist like this thereafter, based upon what preceded it. And God engaged to appoint for this particular task both of these substantial and empowering sources of illumination, with the greater and most capable luminary becoming prominent and clearly known through his governance and proverbs as the influence over the daylight hours, and with the lesser and more recent, more easily understood luminary becoming known and prominent as the influence over the darkness of night, along with the heavenly powers. Barythshyt 1:16. Can't wait to rejoin you and explain all of the insights we can derive from this marvelous statement. This has been In the Beginning as part of the Yahowah blog. And I am your host, Craig Wynn.